and I'm another version of you. That's how I began my blog. That's how we begin this show today, is finding the ways that we are connected more than separated. And welcome to Waking Universe. I'm your host, Lance Mungia, and I am here today with Mr. Geoffrey Greenspahn, the creator of Siddatech. And I'll let you tell us about yourself, Geoffrey. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Lance.
Tell us about what you do and who you are.
Well, I created the Siddatech line of flower essences and co-founded the company almost 4 years ago with my business partner, Stan DeLand. And it's a line of remedies that are really designed to help people release stress. So this is based on my background in traditional Chinese medicine, also my studies in Ayurveda, homeopathy, Siddha medicine.
So that's probably like way more than our audience is going to bite off in one chunk. So let's start at the beginning.
Flower essences really starts in modern times with Bach.
With Bach, the musician? Is that
no, the Bach flower remedies.
Oh, the Bach flower remedies. Okay,
the Bach flower remedies.
I didn't know what those were.
You know, and I don't know the truth of this, but I have a British friend who insists the guy's name is actually Batch because he's British. But everyone sees B-A-C-H, so they assume it's Bach and it sounds the same. But I don't know. So he was the first one to make a rescue remedy and to make all of these different flower essences and to start watching experimentally and empirically what happened with people when they were exposed to different flower essences. So, but that was an outgrowth of homeopathy.
And
So
he was basically just taking a tiny little bit of that flower essence and putting it in the water and shaking it up or doing something to it. And,
well,
and
usually
using it as a remedy.
he takes the flower essence and that creates a mother tincture. And then from the mother tincture, he would extract drops of that and then add that to, usually they add brandy.
Okay.
And to some brandy and some water or something like that. And then that's what would be administered to people. So he was the first one to do this overtly in modern times. So, but this has been going on, this has been developing for 100 years. It just hasn't been developing in very widespread circles. So what happened to me is I was doing a lot of Tai Chi and other martial arts, and this is in my early 20s. And I do some sparring, and I didn't do great with the sparring. The other guys were much stronger than I was. But there was this fella that was, who was kind of a mentor to me. And he was 10 years older, and he had a lot of different experience, and again, a lot of wide-ranging fields of different kinds of medicine and other forms of esoteric knowledge. And he was supposed to bring me a remedy. And he flaked out 3 weeks in a row. And on the fourth week, he brings me this amber bottle wrapped in black electrical tape. And he said, "This is for you. These are flower essences." And I looked at this and I said, these guys are taking potent Chinese herbs so they can hit me harder and make their bones stronger. And you want me to take flower essences. And he was very insistent that he thought it would be helpful for me. So I finally relented and I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I started taking it as he recommended, and within about 3 days, I felt some very deep shifts happen inside me. And there was this kind of softening and this relaxation. And when things changed for me that way, I said, this is amazing. Because I had been doing meditation and acupuncture and internal martial arts such as Tai Chi. I'd been taking herbs. I'd been doing all of these things to try to release all this built up stress. And these flower essences caused a big shift, and it helped me get to places that I wasn't able to get to on my own.
Get to places physically, mentally, spiritually, in what sense?
Mentally and emotionally, I would say. I just became just like that within 3 days. My reactivity level dropped.
So like the way you reacted to other people, stimulus.
Yeah, I was a little more high-strung when I was younger.
Okay.
So, so within a few months after that, I started researching all of the information there was on flower essences, and I started making my own. And probably within 6 months or so, I started experimenting on a few brave friends and family members. And that was over 13 years ago.
What we're basically talking about here is energy, and we're talking about how energy is a thing that can actually affect your health.
I tend to think of it in terms of affecting the electromagnetics of the body. And the nervous system is an incredibly, incredibly sensitive information processing system. And it picks up things, countless things that we're not aware of. It's very similar to how our eyes operate. In other words, our eyes will, the cones in the center of the eye will pick up color and the fine detail. But that tends to be in a very limited range of what we're seeing. It's actually the rods on the outside of the cone that are picking up all of these subtle cues that are happening. It's picking up the movement in the periphery, and it's picking up shades and changes of light and dark. So there's a tremendous amount of information that's coming into us that we're just not conscious of. When we look at different traditional systems of medicine and how they were trying to help people, it was much easier for them to see patterns than it was for them to see things on a microscopic level. So because they saw life in patterns, it became obvious to them that there were patterns within the physical form as well. And they saw that the physical form and its patterns, its cycles, and its systems, many of them mirrored the systems in the external environment. So when I think of this kind of medicine or this approach to helping people, what I think of more is how to provide people with a certain kind of information, how to help them have the certain, you could say, electromagnetic data that they need to unwind and unravel stress that's just accumulated.
So are we talking about auras? Are we talking about something that's a biochemical process in the body? And again, I'm thinking of the person at home who says, well, if I just take a pill, that's going to make me better. Why do I need to worry about electro whatsy-whatsits and all this kind of stuff?
Well, I'd say we're somewhere halfway between the aura and the biochemistry. What we're working with is the electrical part of the nervous system. And this is an undisputed fact. We have part of our nervous system is electrically based. This isn't some kind of new age woo-woo or something like that. It's just that Western medicine typically has one big way of handling that electrical part of the nervous system, and that's with electroshock therapy, which most folks think is a bit harsh for dealing with their minor stresses. So when it comes to, for example, this kind of medicine and why would people want it, the answer is it's the electrical part of us that precedes the chemical part. When we have what we think of as the stress response, a lot of people think of the stress response, they think of adrenaline, they think of epinephrine, they think of a raise in the heart rate, a raise in respiration, increased circulation to the extremities, all those things that you need to jump out of the way of the oncoming car. What they don't realize is that before that chemical cascade happens, there's an electrical shift in the brain. So that shift precedes the chemical cascade. In other words, you're taking in all of this sensory data, again, much of it unconsciously. So this data is all coming in, and at a certain point in time, the central nervous system says, whoa, this is a problem. And as soon as it comes to that conclusion, again, this is generally not consciously, usually after we jump away from the oncoming car or something like that, then we have the thought and the realization, then they realize they almost had an accident or something of the sort.
So it's almost like talking about the difference between intuition and logic or muscle memory. Like for instance, I learned how to drive a stick shift, and pretty soon I don't think about going from first to second. I just do it. And it's like, because on a certain level, it's reached another level of my consciousness, basically.
Which is an interesting thing, because when you get to that level of muscle memory, all of a sudden it goes unconscious again. You're not aware that you're driving the car, but you're sufficiently relaxed about your muscle memory that you can let your body drive the car. So it's a funny thing, but when people drive a car, they don't micromanage. They don't think to themselves, well, now I'm turning left, I should take this hand to go down, and I need to take this hand to go up. They let their body do it. There's a relaxation that happens.
So what we're really talking about is working on the electrical system that precedes physical manifestation, for lack of a better term. I mean,
right.
basically, there could be something blocking you electrically, which is making you sick. And you can correct that by putting electroshock or a much milder version of electroshock, perhaps.
Sure.
How did you personally figure this out? What was the aha moment for you that went, wow, your body has an electrical system and you can manipulate that electrical system?
Well, it's kind of a strange story because I'm actually from a family of Western MDs. My father's a cardiologist, my older brother's an internist, my younger brother is in pharmaceuticals. I have cousins that are doctors and great uncles. But when I was 14, I was a bit of a strange child, I guess.
You're talking about like Chucky kind of strange, or
no. I was just, I was into things that were a little unusual. And one of the things was I love to read.
That's highly unusual.
Which, unfortunately, for a lot of kids, that's. But a lot of the stuff I like to read was kind of off the beaten track. And I remember being in a bookstore, and I saw a book on Taoism, and it said Taoism, the Road to Immortality. And I was baffled because it was in the nonfiction section. And I kept going in my head, wait a minute, nonfiction means that it's true, that it's real. So I picked up the book, and I was fascinated by it, and I was fascinated by these guys that had attempted to understand their body on such a deep level that they could tremendously increase their own longevity, their own health, and their own clarity and awareness along the way.
You're talking about the guy that knows how to, the yogi that knows how to make his breath so slow he can live for like a day underwater, or that kind of stuff. I mean,
well, I guess that's an external manifestation of some of those internal abilities, kind of autonomic athletes. But the other thing that was going on when I was a kid, I was very aware that I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of thoughts that were constantly moving through my head. I felt plagued by just thoughts that, wasn't necessarily negative thoughts. It was just too much thinking about everything I came into contact with. So what I saw, what these individuals were trying to do, and that's one of the things that I found appealing about Taoism, is it's really about individuals. There is very little organization involved. But there were people that were trying to become aware of what was happening inside them. And in the process of doing that, sometimes unusual abilities manifest themselves, but it's pretty unusual for Olympic athletes to do what they do as well.
Right. It's really about putting your mind in the frame that anything is possible. And it's not so much, I think, that you would put your mind in the frame of like, wow, I think I'm going to levitate at this moment. But it's the idea that, I think there's your physical body and your energetic body, and you can fine-tune the energy perhaps more than people realize, I guess, right?
Yeah. What I found was that the idea of meditation, I think it gets very confusing because a lot of people there's all sorts of strange connotations and stuff about, well, you just sit down and meditate and then you levitate, or I don't know, something like that. I like to think of it as paying attention, right? So if we just instead of thinking of it as meditation, we think of it as paying attention, we find out that what we're trying to do is maybe stop paying attention to all the chatter that's happening around us all the time, and we just stop, we sit down, we close our eyes, hopefully in a relatively quiet place. And the point of doing that is so that you can find out what's happening on the inside. What does my heartbeat feel like? What do my lungs feel like? What does my breath feel like?
In a religious context, I've heard it said that prayer is the act of talking to God, meditation is the act of listening to the response. It's not something external, it's something internal, that allows you to kind of just check in with yourself and listen.
I like that. I like that a lot. Because I do think the whole world is speaking to us all the time. And for most people, it becomes very difficult to listen. They have so much chatter, and they have so much of this. When I talk about the bends and the twists in the electrical part of the nervous system, I'm talking about these reserves of emotions, these emotional charges that people have from years and years and even decades into the past.
So are you saying that my thoughts, if I'm harboring a thought, that somehow is blocking me electrically? Like the thought actually manifests as an electrical current or something, or a piece of wrong wiring, basically.
Yeah, it's actually, the way I think of it is actually a variance. So we have electrical currents flowing through us all the time, but hopefully they're harmonious. Hopefully there's equilibrium there. This is what much of the principles of Chinese medicine are about, are balancing yin and yang and keeping those flows in harmony.
I've been to an acupuncturist, and when I went at the time, I went out of desperation because I didn't know what else to do, because I was getting horrible migraine headaches and I needed something done, and didn't fully understand it, but found it fascinating that in Chinese medicine they look at the whole, not the specific symptom, which seems like it's the exact opposite of what Western medicine does.
Well, I guess it depends on if it's a good doctor or not.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I've definitely found that to be the case. But part of that's the patient too. When people have an external symptom that they don't like, they often feel the need, hey, if I just shut the symptom down, if I just make it go away, then my problem will be gone. But they don't understand that symptom is actually the body responding to an underlying problem. So I guess the most overt example I can give is if you eat bad seafood and you get food poisoning, the body's response is to get rid of it.
Right.
And the getting rid of it is very, very unpleasant for most people. And so there might be an impulse to shut that down. But the truth is, you need that out of the body. If that poisonous material stays in the body, it's going to cause far more difficulty than through the uncomfortable process of it leaving the body.
So let's talk about that. So first you got into reading and you discovered, wow, there's this world of basically an ability to control your health through your mind, basically. How did that translate to now I'm going to take flower essences and charge water with it, and that somehow is going to have an effect on my electrical field, which is what Siddha basically is, if I'm right.
Right. Well, I guess this is quite a story, but here we go.
Please, hit us with it.
So when I started reading these texts, I found that the seminal texts of Taoism were the Tao Te Ching and the Chuang-Tzu. And the Tao Te Ching just means the book of virtue and the way, or you could say the virtue of following the way. But there is no way. All it means is paying attention to the external environment and seeing the patterns and the systems that move there, and trying to get your internal systems to align in harmony with those external systems. That's the way. So, I took it upon myself to start memorizing the Tao Te Ching, and it's not that long.
How old were you?
14.
Okay.
A bit of an odd kid. So as I was going through it, I had this idea that these things I was reading, I wasn't going to understand them. But if I just stuck them in my head, someday I would. And it's kind of the reverse of advertising, right? So we're hoping that the advertising signals don't get stuck in our head and impel us to make the wrong consumer choices. But the idea of for example, the Chuang-Tzu is writing from this position of freedom, this wild openness and this enjoyment of life and this enjoyment of everything that life has to offer without any sort of enculturated limitations on how he can move through the world or how he can experience all that's possible with the human form. So I was reading these Taoist texts, and when I was 17, I met Sifu Wang. Sifu is a Cantonese word for teacher, and he was very traditionally raised martial artist and acupuncturist and master of Qigong, which means the skill of working with the Qi, or the life force. And I began studying with him. Traditional Chinese medicine, martial arts, meditation, and from there I got a bachelor's degree in philosophy and comparative religion, so to broaden my horizon, to make sure I was getting information from as many angles as possible. And one of the big changes that happened for me when I was in college is I really took quite fondly to logic. Because there's so many people spinning so many stories. What I found is if I understood the underlying structure of how people tell you things, I would know when they were trying to trick me. I would know when their story didn't make any sense, even if I didn't understand the content. And this is really, this attitude of understanding the underlying structure is what I took with me. At the end of college, I went to acupuncture school. I decided that was, like I said, I told you beforehand, I wasn't tough enough to continue with the martial arts. So it was either that or the medicine. So I went with the medicine and thoroughly enjoyed it. But what I found is that when I went to school, I wasn't really getting access to the same kind of information that I had when I was studying with my teacher.
I find that a lot, is that when you're put into an environment where everybody is doing the same thing, it totally changes the sort of naivete that you have when you're just starting and anything is possible, and you maybe broaden your horizons even more.
Sure. And so unfortunately my teacher had died. Sifu Wang died just about that time. So I was in acupuncture school, and for me it was, I learned most of the material ahead of time. So for me it was a question of kind of going through the official channels. So I spent my time studying Ayurveda, the traditional medicine of India.
And how does Ayurveda differ from Chinese medicine? I know very little about Ayurvedic medicine.
Wow,
is it the same sort of, in a nutshell, is it the same sort of your body is an electrical field and it works on those in that way, or is it so it's basically again going back to that idea that there's an electrical component to your biology?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And what I found is that in Ayurveda and in Siddha medicine from the south of India, and in homeopathy and in traditional medicines all over the world, this idea is paramount.
So basically you had an aha moment that went, wow, they're talking about the same thing over here as over here as over here as over here. You know, and that, I find that awesome.
And they see slightly different patterns.
Yeah.
So some folks see it just like this and some folks see it like that. But if you get the vantage point that you can see 4 or 5 of these, you say, oh, well, these guys are talking about the same thing that these guys are talking about. Again, they didn't have microscopes.
Right. And they also
so
didn't have the internet. You know,
true.
They didn't have the ability to know 1,000 years ago, or even 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, that there was a guy over in China talking about the same thing as a Western scientist talking about homeopathy, or
That's true.
a guy in India. So and I find that it's interesting, and that's again why I wanted to do this show, and with you in particular as my first guest, really, is talking about how all of those things connect and connect us because it's universal.
Well, that's exactly that's been my approach. My approach has been to understand how all of these underlying systems are, how all of these overt different traditional systems are talking about underlying structure, and that's the stuff that I've always been interested and fascinated with. Whether it was studying logic and understanding the underlying structure of thought and of well-reasoned argument, or understanding the underlying structure of the physical body and how the mind and emotions relate to the physical form. So understanding and trying to get a broad perspective from all of these systems led me to some very important understanding, and the most important of which was that it's the stress, what we call stress in the West, what we can break down as all of the afflictive emotions, right? So when someone says I'm stressed, what they're actually saying is I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm upset, I'm sad, I'm anxious, I'm all of these things. But it's that becomes the dominant factor in people's health.
So basically, by harboring a grudge, by feeling I'm not adequate, by feeling by being mad,
Sure.
you're creating a block, and that block becomes not just energetic but physical. And that's and it's like so. And I've always looked at it that way. Not always, but at least recently, I look at it in the sense that you can do all kinds of things that are great for your health, which will increase that energetic circulation in your body. But if you haven't gotten your mind wrapped around it to where you're still carrying it around, You know, and what I find interesting is in going back and studying not the science is like Indian medicine or Chinese medicine or whatever, but just in studying the philosophy and what the great masters of philosophy and founders of great religions have said. It's basically like, let go of your baggage. You know, don't carry around your baggage. Like, you know, just forgive and let live, and, you know, do your thing. And when I was younger, I used to think, wow, this is just this is a concept. This is just a nice thing to keep people out of trouble. But it's not. It's actually, it sounds like you're saying, you know, is the key to being healthy, because it allows you to get rid of all those mental blockages that are causing you ill health.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. That it's these all of these experiences that you could say we haven't digested, all of this sensory data that's come in, and the nervous system has said that's not okay. Whether it comes in visually, whether it comes in audially, whether it comes in through any of our senses, when we can't process that data, it backs up, and the backlog of that data becomes very destructive to the form.
So, like, it's the difference between listening to Mozart or you know, heavy metal music or something that is just pounding. It's all vibration. It's all a vibration that you're being hit with that elicits a certain reaction.
Well, interestingly enough, I think that most kids that are listening to that really heavy pounding music are trying to use that music to pound through big overt blockages.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
It's not a good long-term strategy.
But it's a way of connecting to a vibration that is about a release, basically.
Right.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. That's very interesting.
So when you move into, say, something more subtle and something more sophisticated, Mozart or something of the sort, you're trying to fine-tune what's happening within you. So that's really the ecstasy of listening to music. It's not so much of the actual music. It's what the music is doing to you.
Right.
It's what's happening to you in relationship to what you're hearing.
Right.
And these are moments of possibility for people to release some old emotions, to find insight, to find access into places that it's hard for them to get to on their own.
So I think we've established pretty well in my mind anyway that okay, there's an energetic vibration that you're hit with all of the time, you know, and it's like, and you filter that through this thing that you have called a brain, and eyes, and ears, and that translates into the energy of your body, right? Does that sound sort of succinct, I guess?
Well, it translates into the chemistry of your body as well.
Into the chemistry,
sure.
right. And starting with the energy moving into the chemistry. So that's the principle behind what you do, you know, and behind a lot of these ancient traditions. How do we take that and move that into the now, into today? Like, tell me the story of like you in your garage with the mad scientist, you know, lights in the background, and you pouring beakers or whatever, you know, to figure out how to actually take that knowledge that you acquired in a philosophical sense and make it a tangible sense.
The faculties that you develop in meditation are the same faculties. That faculty of discrimination is the same thing that an audio engineer develops with his hearing, that an artist develops with what they see, that what a wine taster develops with their sense of taste. That very fine-tuned sense of discrimination. You can develop it with anything. And what I was fascinated with and kind of fell in love with was this process of feeling all the subtle variations that happen when you take different flowers.
Because you were already into meditation, you were used to sensing, shall I say, subtle energy? Is that like what you would call it? Like it's like you were used to being able to be so in tune with your body that when you put something into it, you can tell the difference. Is that right?
Yeah. When I could take one of these flower essences, I was very used to watching my own mind and how thoughts moved through the fabric of mind. So I would notice a shift like this. I was very in tune with how my different parts of my body were tensing up or relaxing.
So you basically became your own best test subject to say, hey, well, this one works for this and this one works for that, because you can see how it reacted in you.
Well, for a lot of what I did, it was verifying people that had already done that. So it was experimenting and saying, well, this fella says this, but I don't think it really does that. I think it actually does this and this and this. And I took my knowledge of underlying structure gleaned from these different traditional medical systems and said, oh, I see what it's happening. It's affecting these acupuncture pathways, or it's affecting this nadi system, or it's affecting these different parts of the electrical aspect of being. And that's how it impacts the physical part.
And you're saying by randomly saying, okay, I'm going to try today this flower, and then I know this flower has a different reaction than this other flower, basically.
Well, it wasn't random,
Well,
but
based on what had been done before, and
Sure.
reading texts going way back, and how
Sure.
I see.
Sure. So a lot of this information was out there, and a lot of it is in the homeopathic literature. But I don't think many people within that particular school have a framework for understanding why their things do what they do. They know that they do. They have the empirical knowledge.
Yes.
But
Yes. I have actually spoken to homeopathists and said, "How does this work?" And they said, "I don't know. It just works." And that is the case, I think, with a lot of it. I mean, how does electricity work? Like define the process of electricity. I mean, maybe somebody can, but for most people, it just works. You turn on a light switch and there's electricity.
good enough. When you're dealing in the realm of medicine, you're dealing with how people are responding and how people are feeling. You either are making a tangible, concrete improvement, or you're not. When we're looking at Chinese medicine, for example, Chinese medicine will talk about the liver. And they'll say what's directly connected to the liver. Now, everything in the body is somehow related back. The liver has more than 600 different physical functions that we know of. But in Chinese medicine, the liver is the yin organ and the gallbladder is the yang organ, and they're paired together. Well, they also are connected to the eyes, which is why jaundice causes yellow eyes.
Ah, interesting.
They also govern upward movements, which is why people's face turns red when they drink too much alcohol or they get angry. They say that anger is all connected to the liver. So there's a lot of different traditional understandings like this, emotional systems and different organ systems and how they all relate together. And that's the kind of information I was able to use and bring together.
Well, I mean, first of all, for those of you who are just tuning in, if you are just tuning in, this is Waking Universe, and I am here with Geoffrey Greenspahn, who is the creator of Siddatech and makes flower essences that are designed to work on your body on an energetic level, if that's correct. So it still fascinates me, this process of how you can infuse water with energy from a flower, and that is now going to affect me, because it's like I get stuck in this rational thinking of, the more I take of something, the better. But it almost seems like the less that's in it, the better that it works. And I know, for instance, like with water, there's experiments that have been done where simply by focusing your thoughts on water, you can put that water under an electron microscope and it changes the crystals of the water. Like depending if you're focusing angry thoughts or you're focusing, loving, peaceful thoughts. And is that how you would say something like what you do works, or is it like how are you physically transferring that energy into the formula?
Well, I'd say that the nervous system is way more sensitive than people realize. And I read this article by Brian Eno on non-confrontational sound. He's a music producer. Do you know him?
I know, yeah, I've heard of him.
So he wrote this great article, and it really just blew my mind because he was talking about kind of musical Tai Chi. He was talking about the same principles, it was just with sound with him. And what he would say is that when you listen to a song, there's a you that's listening to a song, right? There's this overt presence that's engaging with another set of data. So what he was trying to do was develop what he called non-confrontational sound, what I guess we would call nowadays mood music. Right? So the idea is you don't hear it. You don't hear the soundscape in the background, but it actually has a greater effect on you.
Yes. Well, this is like binaural beats. I don't know if you know what that is.
Sure.
Binaural beats are super low frequencies that you don't hear. Put to another track, it actually focuses your mind more because you don't hear it.
Right.
Or for that matter, subliminal advertising. In movie theaters, that product placement and all of these things that you don't focus on, but it's there, and then pretty soon you're going out and buying Coca-Cola.
It's funny. I've actually described it that same way. I think all advertising, if it's worth its salt, is subliminal. When you drive down the freeway and you see a billboard and there's a beautiful woman and she's got a watch on, there's no advertiser that thinks that someone's going to see that billboard and say, God, that's a great looking watch. I'm going to go buy that watch.
Let me check the time.
They don't think that, right?
Right.
So What the advertiser is really hoping for is that you're going to drive past that billboard 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
And after driving by it 1,000 times, maybe your girlfriend breaks up with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe somewhere in the back of your head you start thinking to yourself, geez, I really feel like I could use a watch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because you've now linked, you've made that association between the beautiful woman and the watch, and you no longer have your beautiful woman.
Mm-hmm.
So some part of you thinks, well, if I get the watch, maybe I'll get the woman that goes with it.
Right, right.
So, but that's a subconscious process.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't aware that that's what's happening.
Well, you talk about flower essences working on various levels of like the conscious, the subconscious, the unconscious.
Sure.
You know, tell me about that. Like how can something, how can a flower essence affect me on a subconscious level or even on an unconscious level, and what does that mean to you?
Well, I'd like to put it in terms that are maybe easier for people to understand.
Please, for me.
Walking down the street in Los Angeles
Mm-hmm.
has a feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you spend too much time walking along some of those busy city streets in Los Angeles, you're going to feel lousy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the fact that you're inhaling all the exhaust or anything like that. It's also what you're picking up from your environment.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you picking up? You're picking up that all the surfaces are flat,
Mm-hmm.
that all the angles are 90 degrees. You're picking up that the concrete is something that isn't just generally good for our skeletal
Mm-hmm.
structure. So you're picking up all this information. You can be walking along a busy city street at 2 in the morning that's bright as day. Now this is more information that your nervous system is taking in that has no idea what to do with. This is all going in. This is going in, this is going in. And what happens? People generally feel lousy.
Mm-hmm. Or driving in traffic, for that matter.
Sure.
You know, I mean, you know, there's plenty of times like I'll have to drive coming from Malibu to here. You know, can be very stressful, and it drains you. It physically takes away your energy in a way that you probably don't even get consciously, and then you just show up and go, "Why am I so tired?"
Why am I exhausted? Nothing bad happened.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your conscious mind doesn't see all those tiny little things that happened along the way.
So this is subconscious.
This is subconscious.
So subconscious. So how does a vibrational remedy, you know, an energy remedy, work on your subconscious?
Well, it's like changing the environment.
Mm-hmm.
It's like putting one little drop of something, maybe putting a drop of food coloring
Mm-hmm.
into water.
Mm-hmm.
Another person might look at it and say, oh, I don't notice there's anything different.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a very subtle eye and you're trained to look at these things, oh no, you can see there's a very, very faint shimmer of pink in the water because you put a red drop in there.
Right.
So it's that slowly and subtly changes the environment.
Mm-hmm.
What I want people to feel like, I want people to feel like they're surrounded by flowers.
Mm-hmm.
I want people to feel like they're in a garden.
Right.
Right? Because when we're surrounded by flowers and we're in a garden, there's a deep, deep part of our nervous system that says, things are okay. Mm-hmm. We can relax.
And then the unconscious mind. What's the difference between the subconscious mind to you and the unconscious mind? And how does that sort of same philosophy work on your unconscious?
That's a good question. The conscious mind, I think of the conscious mind as discursive thought.
Mm-hmm.
So discursive thought are the words that are running through your head.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, for most people, that's their conscious mind. It's what they are aware of now.
Right.
The subconscious is what they can become aware of.
Mm-hmm.
It's what they're aware of every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's the restaurant where I got sick.
Right, right.
They're not thinking about it unless they drive by the restaurant and boom, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
The unconscious is the stuff that's so far down and so far back that they have very little awareness of it at all.
So would you say like your heartbeat, like your nervous system, or would you even take it into a more spiritual realm of like, you know, the Freudian, or not the Freudian, the Jungian sense of you know, you being connected to a greater force?
I would think more in terms of, for example, digestion.
Mm-hmm.
You eat way too much food, you'll become very conscious of your digestion.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If you, but right now, it's in your subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
You're not aware of it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But unless something really goes wrong, again, let's pick your liver,
Mm-hmm.
you're almost not aware at all. You're unconscious of what's happening with your liver.
Mm.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing. you don't want to be entirely conscious of what you're driving
Right.
either. We talked about that before, because it makes people feel like they need to micromanage everything. The trick is really, I think, to gain consciousness of different parts of your being so you can turn them on. So you can make sure that the blood is flowing there, that you can make sure there's proper oxygenation, nutrient supply, and waste removal to different parts of your body. And once you can bring them up to where they need to be, now you can forget them again. Right? It's just like learning how to drive. When you learn how to drive, you really need to be conscious of the gas.
Right.
In fact, when you get into a car you're not used to, and you hit the brake, and it's a real tight brake, you go, whoa, oh, that's how that works. You become very conscious of it again. And then once you get used to it, it drops back down into the unconscious. So it's that process of gaining awareness, gaining consciousness, clearing it up so that it's operating as it should be. Whoa, don't press too hard on the brakes. And then letting it recede back into a relaxed state. That relaxed state that you can actually operate from. You don't have to be in beta thought all the time, right? Beta thought is that particular band that's associated with anxiety and overt problem solving. You can drop down and operate from alpha. You can actually operate from theta. You can move through your life in a relaxed way.
Well, that's the very best of creativity is like that. Like for me as a writer, like when I'm writing and I look at my watch and go, wow, it's been 3 hours. I didn't even know where'd that time go. Or for an athlete, when an athlete is just in that zone, and is able to leap that high pole or run that marathon, and it becomes like unconscious. You're not thinking about it at all.
Until afterwards, and that's what knocks you out of the zone.
Right. And that's to me like where something like meditation or something like that comes in, because it strengthens that ability to stay in that moment, without thinking about it. It keeps, it's like a muscle that you work out. And for what's interesting to me though is then bringing it back into that scientific sense that there's an actual electrical signal there, that you are either perpetuating and strengthening or blocking. Based on if you are in that moment or not.
Well, I'll get into that in half a moment, but I want to talk about something that you mentioned. When people are in the zone, or when people are using meditation to get into the zone, you can actually use meditation in unhealthy ways.
Oh, interesting.
It sounds strange, but you can run all sorts of negative thoughts through your head all day long, and you can do the same kind of things with meditation. So the idea for me isn't to use meditation to kind of strengthen a muscle that allows me to be into place, but really to find those places that pull me out of that place and let them go. So the idea is your body knows how to do everything. Meditation or different modalities are about finding the places where you won't relax. And as you release them, you naturally sink in with no effort into those deeper places.
But what you're saying though is that there's also I don't know if you would call it a biochemical or a biochemical energetic process or something that's totally outside of yourself that can allow you to do that.
Oh, sure.
Which I guess makes sense because people take Prozac. People take something else that just puts them in an artificially relaxed state. You can take a Valium or something, I guess. But it's like what's interesting is that you're just taking basically water with an essence of something in it, and that is it's creating an energetic difference.
Well, you go to the beach too.
Right. Get some sun, get some salt air.
Right. That's going to make you feel better.
Changes your perception.
So you can also look at it from the opposite perspective. So how do you feel and what kind of mental state are you in when your body is very sick or when you're injured or when you're chronically in pain? All of those things are creating kind of very strong ripples in the mind. And you can feel them. It becomes very obvious if you actually stop and pay attention to them. You can actually say to people, how are you feeling today? Oh, my mind is making me nuts today. Well, so there's this awareness that your mind does all sorts of different things. And some days it's very rough, and some days the waters are a little more calm. So the idea of it is, as you can progressively make the waters more calm, the little ripples might seem like a mountain, but they're much, much less than what they used to be, because you used to have giant waves everywhere. So we're trying to bring things to a place of equilibrium, a dynamic equilibrium though, not just a
Right. You're not zoned out to where you can't experience a high or a low. You're just able to, and neither one phases you as much. Is that accurate?
Well, it's funny. People think about their emotions in such a way that, oh, if I didn't have my emotions, you know, life wouldn't be worth living. But the truth is, love is not an emotion. Right?
That's interesting. Yeah, expand on that.
And deep happiness and fulfillment, these aren't emotions. We just lump it into that general category because we have thoughts, we have emotions, and we have a body. And we're aware that we have those three things, but we're not really sure how the three mix together. But when we experience love, it has a very, very different quality, a very, very different feel than, say, anger. But anger has a much more similar feel to, let's say, that kind of manic happiness. That manic happiness, which is sometimes translated as joy, in Chinese medicine, that's considered one of the afflictive emotions.
Yeah, I mean, because if you're in a manic happiness state, it's almost like, again, a state of denial in the same state that like fear or anger is, and that you're almost afraid that you may not have it, and so you're just amping it up again and again. You know, versus that state of like, yeah, this is cool, this is good. You know, it's like, I see what you're saying, but it's interesting that you say that love is not an emotion. So if it's not an emotion, what is it?
Well, I think love is the fabric of everything. I think it's the ground substance.
It's so interesting that you say that, and again, that is what this show is about. Is that, you know, there's some things that are a template for everything else, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you are or what you are, it just is. You know, and to me, that's love. You know, like when you are in a state of love, you know, it's like ground zero. You know, and again, it's interesting to me that you can put that into a flower essence, you can put that into a homeopathic remedy, you can put that into just your mind through a thought. You know, but it has a tangible effect that you may not be able to fully understand in the world.
Well, it's funny. I don't actually think that the flower essence can bring about love. No, but what I think is it can reveal it.
How so?
Well, if love is, you could say, if the mind is like a lake, and love is the treasure at the bottom of the lake, it's all of the ripples on the surface that prevent us from seeing and noticing that treasure. It doesn't change the treasure. None of those emotions will actually affect the treasure. But if you can calm that surface, it becomes very obvious what's been there all along. And that's the idea. The idea for me of the Siddatech flower essences, and actually, to be fair, most forms of traditional medicine, it's to remove these obstacles and let people enjoy their natural state. Right. And for me, it's my firm belief that that natural state is a state of love.
Well, you and many others, many other people who you know, I mean, but I think that the difference between the age that we're in now and the age that we were in maybe even, like I said, 50, 100 years ago, is that there's tangibleness to it now, in a sense that you can see the benefits of your health in terms of science, in terms of the entanglement of everything, you know, on a spiritual level in one sense, but also on a quantum physics scientific level. It's all related, you know, and the only thing separating it from you is all that issues and, you know, crapola that you have,
which is just keeping surface, that lake. But that's all just surface stuff,
right?
Not that it can be ignored. It's very real, but it doesn't have the reality and the truth that treasure does. Right. So I think we need to acknowledge it in order to find our treasure. But it's also, I think, important for us to take the perspective that, you know, if we can just get into that place, I think that calms the surface of the waters more than anything else.
I think it's about realizing that it's there the whole time. You know, like people spend their whole lives, you know, going through all this, you know, through rituals and like, I'm going to take all of these different remedies and things and do all of these things, you know, and because it's something that's over here that needs to be, you know, brought in, you know, not realizing that, like, you know, oh, you mean all I had to do was just basically relax and slow down and, you know, and let the ripples recede a little bit, and then I'd see that thing down there at the bottom of the ocean, and, you know.
It's been in your heart all along.
Right.
I don't know if I'm getting a little too warm and fuzzy for you,
but it's so great that on the one sense you're taking that feeling and that passion, you know, for what you do, and you're making it tangible. You know, that to me is what we need. You know, we need, you know, people to take the esoteric and make it, you know, real. You know,
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I think for too long there's been that disconnect between ideas meeting the firmness of the earth.
Yeah,
and the proof of the idea is in its efficacy.
And I think that it's just the one thing I really want to convey with this interview, and have you be able to convey, is that we're not talking about, you know, something woo-woo. You know, we're not talking about, you know, something up in the ethers that you know is a philosophy. We're talking about something that actually has tangible benefits to your health and to your life and to your environment and everything else. You know, because you are those electrical impulses as much as you are your skin. You know, and maybe if you want to address the camera and tell the folks at home where can they go to find out more about you know, you and what you do.
You can find us at Siddatech.com. That's SIDDATECH.com. And if you're interested in the products, they're to be found in all sorts of retail locations, and you can buy them online too. Great.
Geoffrey, thank you so much for an amazing hour of conversation. I could do this all day long with you. I mean, it really is. It's fun, and I hope that the people at home, you know, take something away from this. That there is a world out there that is just, to me, exciting and interesting and new in a very old way. and so thank you so much for joining us for Waking Universe. And this has been our debut show. We hope to be back again soon. And again, thank you so much, Geoffrey, for coming out. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And good night.